9 brothers and sisters, and he was the oldest boy. And every day he went down in that mine shaft with his lunch bucket. And he saved money, and my grandma did, in the basement of their tiny little house for my dad and his brother to go to college. And my dad went to a 2-year community college, which is part of why I'm such a big believer in those. And he went to this 2-year community college, and then from there he went to the University of Minnesota. He finished up there and got a degree in journalism and went on to be a newspaper man and went on to interview everyone from the Chicago Bears coach Mike Ditka to Ginger Rogers. So, that was pretty fun. And then my mom grew up in Milwaukee, which is going to be the site of our convention for 2020. And say that around the country, usually people cheer, except in Las Vegas, because they think they should have all conventions, I guess. And so she grew up there, and she was a teacher and got her teaching degree, and she moved to Minnesota because they had a strong teachers union. And she ended up teaching 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. And I still see people that say she was their favorite teacher. And she loved books. That's why I walk in the library. I think of my mom. She had all these kids' books she'd keep. Her favorite unit to teach was the monarch butterfly unit. Yes. And she would dress as a monarch butterfly when she released the butterfly in a butterfly tunic with antennas and tights. And a sign that said "To Mexico or Bust," because that's where the monarch. And she would then every day when they released the butterfly, she would go and wear that costume to grocery shopping. And it was only after she died, the night of the visitation, that I understood why she went to this one grocery store. This family came out. The mom was sobbing. I'd never met her before, with this older boy who was disabled. And she said, "This is my son, and he had your mom in 2nd grade. And his favorite thing she taught was about those monarch butterflies. He just loved that." And so after he graduated, a decade later, he gets a job bagging groceries at that store. And she said, "Your mom would go to that store in that costume every single year, stand in the line where he was bagging groceries, and give him a big hug." So that was my mom. And I stand before you today as the granddaughter of an iron ore miner and the daughter of a teacher and a newspaper man, as the first woman elected to the United States Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for president. Shared dreams are about. That is what a country's about, where no matter you come from or what you look like or where you're from or who you love, that you can run for president of the United States and you can be the president of the United States. And so that's what has really motivated me to take on these challenges that are right in front of our eyes, and to look people in the eyes and tell them what I think. I am not someone that minces words. When you have that Iron Range background, you can't be. I see these challenges, that while our economy is stable, Barack Obama, who is a great president. I was just at Made Right, by the way, in Newton, and it was their anniversary, and I had a sandwich, and the owner, who was great, sat with me, but he came out and he brought a picture of Barack Obama in that same restaurant, and we took a photo with him. But Barack Obama inherited this economy that was a mess, and because of the good work of our workers, the good work of our businesses, the good work of some of the policies that he helped guide in place, we were able to get a stable economy, right? We were able to have some growth. But it was so hard to take on every challenge. He took on health care and passed the Affordable Care Act. But there were challenges that we were supposed to be taking care of these 4 years, which actually, when your economy is stable, are easier to deal with. But instead, we've been in chaos every single day. So what does that mean? Well, that means, first of all, we haven't done anything. In fact, we've gone backwards when it comes to taking on climate change, all right? And so if people think that this isn't going on right now, look at what's happening. And one of the things that I can do as someone from the Midwest is I can speak from the heartland about the effects of climate change. That it's not just about rising ocean levels. It is not just about what's happening on the waterfronts, although that is a big problem, what they're seeing with loss of property and flooding. But it's also about what's happening in the middle of the country, right? It is those tornadoes. It's the flooding, like we're seeing in unprecedented levels in places that haven't flooded before. When I was in western Iowa in Pacific Junction outside of Council Bluffs, This was with this woman named Fran, and she had a house out there with her husband and their 2 4-year-old twins, and she had these binoculars on. She was like this woman of the prairie that felt like she'd been there for 300 years, I don't know, and she said, look through the binoculars, she said, this is my house, this is the place I was gonna live till I died. This is the place where I have this kitchen that I love so much. And she said, there's plaster on the walls of this house. It's been there for over a century, and there's still horsehair in the plaster because it's been there for so long. And then I said, well, this is a river right next door to where this house is, because there's all this water, and I figure, well, you know. And she said, no, that's the flooding. She said, the river is 2.5 miles away, and that's why this house has never flooded before. So when we talk about climate change, we're talking about people like Fran. We're talking about the wildfires and those firefighters that died in Arizona and what happened in Colorado. We're talking about that dad that drives through that fire outside of Paradise in Northern California. What a name for what happened. You know, knowing his house is probably burning behind him with his daughter in the car, and as those flames, there's a video of it, you should see it, are going over their car, he's singing to her to calm her down. So climate change isn't happening 100 years from now, it's happening right now. And that is why I pledge to you as your president on day 1, I will sign us back into the International Climate Change Agreement. Bring back those clean power rules that the Obama administration have worked on for so long. They're ready to go. We'll bring those back. We'll bring back the gas mileage standards and do everything we need to do to bring down greenhouse gases and do something about this. And I don't see this as environment versus economy, right? I see, as someone from an ag state like Iowa, and as someone that's on the agriculture committee, I see the good work of conservation practices and what you can do to make this work. And I see homeowners insurance going up by 50% in this country. That's for everyone, not just people in Florida. It's going up even more there. That's for everyone, and that's what's going to keep happening if we don't do something about it. So that's the first challenge that's sitting out there. The second challenge, doing something when it comes to our workforce. We know there are job openings, especially in Iowa and Minnesota and the Midwest, but we've got kids that are graduating that sometimes aren't focused on what those jobs are. We need to match the jobs with the kids. We need to make sure it's easier to go to college. The way I look at it, if billionaires can refinance their yachts, why can't students refinance their student loans? That would be really nice. Makes sense, and that is, you know, we have right now like 3% that are, you literally could pay for that. You could pay for that with what the Buffett rule is, and that means how Warren Buffett pays a lesser percentage of his taxes than his own secretary. You have got Pell Grants that you could expand so it targeted to people that need them the most, and right now that's not happening. And in this great college town, you know, you want everyone to be able to have a degree like you can get in Grinnell. You want people to be able to attend college no matter where it is, and to be able to go and on to work and do well in our country. And that's just getting out of reach for more and more people. You want to have those 2-year community college degrees and make them easier to get them while people are in high school, and respect the dignity of the jobs that come out of those degrees, because right now we have so many openings in construction and in welding and in science, technology, math, at all different levels. We have PhD needs, but we also have needs to take care of robotics equipment and things you can sometimes get with a 1 or a 2-year degree. And so that's how we have to start thinking when we think about what's happening to people who literally aren't even graduating from high school and going off the grid. Part of that workforce is immigration reform. And I believe when I look at our country right now and I see those openings we have in terms of the factories and the nursing homes and the farms, and you think about the immigrants that head up businesses, we need them as an economic force. Yes. And the president is just focused on one thing, right? On the border. And yes, we need security at the border. We don't need an $8 billion wall, all right? But we need security at the border. But what we really need is to see immigrants for what they are, that we, almost all of us, with the exception of our Native American communities, came from somewhere, right? We stand on the shoulders of these immigrants, And when you look at the facts, 70 of our Fortune 500 companies headed by people that are from other countries. That's true. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates from our country were born in other countries. So immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. In 2013 that had a bunch of Republicans voting for it, it brought the debt down by $158 billion. That's how you pay for security, right? That's how you pay to have the personnel to figure what's going on. It's by having people come out of the shadows and pay their taxes. That's why the Chamber and the AFL-CIO were for that bill, because it worked for our economy. Okay. That's one thing, workforce and what you do. So it's training our own workers, making sure we're advancing ourselves, making sure we're not hiding out from the rest of the world, and that we are a leader in the world, and that our president doesn't say embarrassing things and say one thing. I don't even want to go into it. Okay, because I think you need consistency when it comes to foreign power, and you need to stand with your allies, right? And challenge healthcare. I believe that we have to move to universal healthcare, right? So everyone has healthcare. By building on the Affordable Care Act. We have an administration right now in the middle of that bar hearing. Maybe no one noticed, but they literally filed their legal brief to take care of repealing the Affordable Care Act. They're not just saying it. It's not just something you says at rallies. They're actually doing it out of the Justice Department with Barr heading it up. That is what they're doing. They filed that brief this week, the Fifth Circuit, for a case down in Texas. They're doing it as we speak. That would mean bringing back this horrible idea that if people have a pre-existing condition, they can be kicked off their health care. The Affordable Health Care Bill protected us from that. So this is about keeping people's health care insurance. It's about building on that by bringing in a public option, which we wanted to do to begin with Medicaid or Medicare, so you can choose something that is not have all the middlemen in with insurance, and it also means taking on pharmaceutical companies, one of my obsessions. So, I am so excited to talk about this week. I finally got my policy out there on something that I care about very much, and that is fighting addiction and prioritizing mental health treatment. And I take this on first from the heart. My dad struggled with alcoholism his whole life. He had this incredible career, as I tell you. He's now 91 and he's in assisted living. I just saw him last weekend, and as he would tell you, it's hard to get drinks in the assisted living place. But in truth, decades ago, he finally dealt with his addiction when he had his third DWI, and they no longer just patted them on the head and said, oh, sorry, yeah, cool, you're drinking. By the 90s, they actually said, no, you're going to go to jail or you're going to get treatment. He chose treatment. Our family told him what it had meant to us, the fact that he was drinking throughout my time growing up, and my sister, the fact that we would be waiting for him at Christmas and he wouldn't be there, or that I had to take the keys away from him many, many times when we're driving up north to see my grandma. Those are things that happen to people when they have addiction in their family. But through the whole time I love my dad, I love him now. And the fact that he is now there and the AA group still visits him in the assisted living is an incredible thing. And in his words, he was pursued by grace. And that means the treatment he got, but it also means his faith. It means the people around him. It means his family and his friends. And I believe everyone in this country has that same right to be pursued by grace. And yet you talk to people, including in Iowa, and they say, I just don't know how to get help. And this is everything from people who know that their son or daughter is struggling with depression and they're afraid they're going to commit suicide. We've had a 30% increase in suicides. I was around the same number, even worse. 30% increase in 15 years in this country. 30%. A lot of it is people feeling isolated, not enough beds like you have here. You have one of the lowest number of mental health beds because of closures of hospitals and other things. You've got farmers. We had a guy up in Minnesota. I knew his wife pretty well, and they were struggling to keep their farm. They're soybean farmers. You know what's happening with the prices there, what a mess it is. Farm had been in the home for generations, and she didn't know how bad it was. He felt like he was losing his farm, and then he was losing his life, and he was losing his whole identity, and he killed himself. And she is now struggling to keep that farm going. Those things are happening in our country, and that's why the thing that I put out there, you can look at it, it's on our website. amyklobuchar.com, really hard to remember. But there is in there prevention, which includes suicide prevention. It is funding for schools and more counselors. We have a real problem with that. It is looking at what do we do when people do get addicted or have mental health problems, increasing the number of beds, including giving permanently making it so you can get funding through Medicaid, not your privatized Medicaid, which you need to change, but Medicaid after 16 beds, you have to get waivers to get it funded, and this would put it in permanently that you can get that funded. It is making sure that we have the best treatments and looking at how Suboxone works for opioids. Making sure that we're not just talking about opioids because communities of color get hit the most from meth and cocaine. Looking at recovery and when people get out of treatment or they get themselves to a point with their mental illness where they can work, making sure that they can get those jobs. So what we're doing, one good thing we did on a bipartisan basis in Washington was the First Step Act, where we reduced the sentences for nonviolent drug offenders. And we need to do that in state and local jails as well. So it's really a comprehensive approach to this problem. I have put forth a way to pay for it, so it is not just a campaign brochure, $100 billion, and that's a lot of money to help us with beds in Iowa. And it's paid for, one of my favorite pay-fors, you don't usually have favorite pay-fors, but the people that got people hooked on opioids that made millions of dollars off this are the pharmaceutical companies, and so they should pay for the treatment.